Forever youthful, Megan Hicks.
Thank you all so much for being here. It's a joy. It's been a great festival, great audiences, and wonderful organization. This story jolted me out of jet lag in Western Australia about 8 years ago, and I spent the next year looking for it because I had never heard it before that moment. And so I found it, Taffy Thomas has recorded it, and I found it in several anthologies from the British Isles. Now, many fairy tales begin once upon a time, and they end happily ever after. This one doesn't begin or end that way at all. This one begins. Davy hated fish. Everything about fish made Davy sick. The way they smelled, the way they tasted, the sliminess, the way they felt when you took them out of the water, the way their mouths opened, gasping, the way their big old eyes looked up at you blank as they lay on the deck of a boat. Everything about them turned his stomach. Davy hated fish. And this was really unfortunate because Davy worked on a fishing boat. It was a small village. There were no jobs except this one for him. And it was Davy's job all day, every day, in all weather, to sit on the deck of the fishing boat while his boss, the captain, was high and dry up there in the cabin. Davy sat out in the weather on the deck of that boat, and as the big heavy nets came out of the water and dumped the fish that they had caught on the deck in front of him, he had to pick them up one by one. Picked them up, slit their bellies with a sharp knife, scooped out their guts, threw the guts overboard, bait for more fish, chopped their heads off, threw their bodies into a barrel. The barrel collected the fish bodies, and when the day was over, the captain would take the barrel full of fish to market and sell it. All day, every day, that's all Davy did. Pick up the fish, slit the belly, scoop the guts, chop the head, toss the body. Davy hated fish. And one day, it was a dreary, rainy, cold day. He sat there on the deck doing his job, and he thought to himself, is this all my life is going to amount to? Am I going to grow old doing a job that anyone can do that I hate? Is this how I spend my life? At that moment, he looked down on the deck of the boat, and he noticed a fish. And for the first time in his life, he noticed the way the little bit of light reflected in an opalescent sheen on that fish's body. The way its scales looked as though they had been joined together by a master craftsman. The way that eye looked into his soul. And he would swear that fish was imploring him. Davy scooped that fish up, got ready to slit its belly, and that's when he felt the fish's heart beat against his thumb. And Davy knew this was one fish he would not be able to kill. So he laid it beside him, and he waited until he was pretty sure the captain wasn't watching. And then he picked that fish up and he took it over to the rail and he set it back down into the water and it disappeared in a flash of silver. Well, Davy had been wrong about the captain. The captain did see what he had done. And the captain came storming down onto the deck. He said, "Davy, I saw what you did. Now listen, boy, I know your heart's not in this job. I know you've hated it from the first day. Well, I saw what you did, and that's as good as stealing. I do not spend my time and my money pulling those heavy nets out of the water to have my employee put the fish I worked so hard to catch back in the water. You're stealing from me, Davy, so take heart in this." Tonight when we dock, you step off my boat, you'll never set foot on my boat again. Or any other boat in this harbor if I have a say in the matter. You're fired. Davy thought, I'm fired. Hey, I don't ever have to do this again. I don't ever have to do, oh my God, I'm fired. I don't have a job. What am I going to do for rent? What am I going to do for food? What am I going to tell my wife? But still, I don't ever have to do this again. He was confused. He was torn between sad and mad and glad. And in his state of confusion, Davy did the one thing you must never do. If you were on a boat in the ocean, if you are on a boat in the open sea, you must never whistle a tune. If you whistle a tune when you're on a boat in the open sea, what you're doing? You're whistling up the wind of a killer storm, or you're whistling the devil up from hell. Now that evening, when the boat docked and Davy stepped off, all the relief, all the gladness drained away, and he was left with nothing but fear. What am I going to tell my wife? What are we going to do? We'll be turned out into the streets. We'll starve. I'm ruined. His mind was filled with confusion and fear. His eyes were filled with tears. He was full of self-pity. He didn't even know there was someone walking on the road beside him until a little man pulled up right next to him. A little man dressed in farmer's clothes, a bad-fitting wool jacket, baggy wool trousers, mud-encrusted boots. The little man was leading a cow, and the little man pulls up right beside him and says, Davy, Davy, boy, it looks like you got the weight of the world on your shoulders. Davy said, well, I feel like I've got the weight of the world on my shoulders. I've lost my job. I have no future. I don't know what I'm going to tell my wife. I don't know how we're going to live. The little man smiled and he said, Davy, you know what? If you had this cow, Davy, your troubles would be over. Why, do you know, this cow gives the richest milk in all the world, and she gives it abundantly. Davy, if you had this cow, why, oh, with the milk and the butter and the cream, your fortune would be made. Davy said, well, I don't have that cow. You have that cow. I have nothing. It doesn't have to be that way, said the little man. I have a business proposition for you. Suppose I let you have the cow for 3 years. You do what you can with it, the milk, the butter, and the cream. You make the most of it. At the end of 3 years, I come back, I pose 3 questions. Now, if I get the answers to my questions, you keep the cow. You live a long and prosperous life. You never see me again. Oh, but if I don't get the answers to my questions, Davy, well, I throw you over my shoulder and it's down to the flames of hell with you. So what do you say? Do we have a deal? Now, Davy was young. He was only, what, 22, 23 years old. It was that age where 3 years is still eternity. Davy was young. He assumed that anyone who looks like a simple farmer is exactly what they look like, and no more. Davy was young. He thought, how hard can this old guy's questions be, if he even remembers to come back? So on the road that day, Davy extended his right hand. He shook on it. He struck a deal with the devil. Now Davy took the lead of the cow, started walking up the path to his house, and he smelled something burning. He turned around just in time to see that simple little farmer-looking guy do a double backflip and disappear in a crack that opened in the earth and then closed. Well, when Davy got within sight of the house where he lived up on the hill, his wife came out in the yard. She said, Davy, what are you doing with a cow? Davy, you bring fish home, you don't bring cows. What's with the cow? Davy said, well, I've gone into another line of work. I've changed my career path. Darling, he said, you know, this cow gives the richest milk in all the world, and she gives it abundantly. And I was thinking, with the milk and the butter and the cream from this cow, why, we could open a little tea shop in town. You could make the pastries that you're already pretty famous for, and I could run the business, and we could live our dream. What do you think? She said, Davy, this is astonishing. Look here in the newspaper, just today I noticed an ad, property for rent. There's a little corner shop right in the village, and look how cheap the rent is. Davy, we can do this. And so they opened their little tea shop. Now the devil was right. That cow gave the richest milk in all the world. She gave it abundantly, and with the milk and the butter and the cream from that cow, Davy's wife made pastries that were irresistible. Why, before too long, people were making the journey all the way to this tiny little village just to visit the tea shop. Before they knew it, they were running a profitable business. Before they knew it, they were happy. Before he knew it, 3 years had passed. Davy had almost forgotten about the bargain he had struck on the road that day. It was the last day of the 3rd year. And Davy looked up from the counter at a time of day when that tea shop was generally full and bustling with activity, but there were no customers. There was just one old man over in the corner reading his newspaper. Davy thought, well, I'll sweep up. I'll go home early. So he got the broom and he started sweeping the crumbs out the door. As soon as he got to the door of his shop, a shadow loomed over him and cast the shop in darkness. Davy looked up, and there was the devil himself, not looking a thing like a harmless old farmer. He had rubbed oil into his skin until it glowed and it shone red. That tail of his was twitching across the walkway, and the metal barb was striking sparks. Davy staggered backward when he saw the devil, and the devil looked down at him and said, yeah, Davy, yes, I see by the look on your face, it's all coming back to you now, isn't it? The terms of the bargain we struck on the road that day. Well, I have to say, in 3 years you have done wonders. You have done wonders with that cow, Davy. And now, for the other part of the bargain, I pose my 3 questions. If I get my answers, you keep the cow, you live a long and prosperous life, you don't ever see me again. But if I don't get my answers, Davy, over my shoulder, down to the flames of hell with you. So, are you ready to begin? Now, before Davy could answer, the old man in the corner looked up from his newspaper, and he said, yes, he is ready to begin. That was your first question, sir. This interruption threw the devil off his guard. It put him off balance. It upset him. He looked at the old man, he looked at Davy, looked at the old man, he looked at Davy. He said, Davy, will you tell that old coot to butt out of our business and leave us alone? And before he answered, Davy looked at the old man. He winked. He smiled. He looked at the devil. He said, no, I won't. And that was her second question. Now the old man applauded. He said, well played, Davy, well played. I knew you were a bright lad. This infuriated the devil. He walked over to where the old man sat. He loomed over him and he bellowed, just who the hell do you think you are anyway? And that old man stood up and up and up until he was eyeball to eyeball with the devil. He took his hat off, silver hair cascaded all the way down to the ground. He said, "I am the king of the fishes." 3 years ago, this young man saved my life. He showed me mercy. I return today to repay the favor. That was your third question, sir. So back to the flames of hell with you. Now leave this boy alone.